Teste.
Não, porque eu vi uma conferência dessas, não, ano passado, no Dubai. Nós tínhamos visto lá, realmente. Vocês também tiveram liga o microfone. Para que para pôr os auscultadores não dá para pôr o microfone. Só para pôr put your headphones on because I will start from the microphone. Vamos correr.
Okay, so good afternoon to all of you, and also to the ones watching far away from here or listening to the recording of this session. We'll now have a panel promoted by Zero. I'm the president of Zero. My name is Francisco Ferreira, and I would like to welcome you to one of the three events that we have during this COP29 here at the Portuguese Pavilion. And we would like to first acknowledge the possibility of the Portuguese government, in this case, in particular the Ministry of Environment and Energy, to allow us to have this event here. And the event will talk about electrifying the future, accelerating decarbonisation through high-use public vehicles electrification. So one of our major topics is indeed the issues related with road transport and climate. Today, here at COP, we actually presented a work where we participated in the so-called CCPI, Climate Change Performance Index. This index, in this index, Portugal is number 15, and one of the reasons for us to decrease 2 places in the ranking was exactly the issue of road transport and the emissions that are still stable in this particular sector in our country. I will not introduce the speakers and the discussion. There will be a role for Margarida Marques later on, but I would like to introduce our keynote speaker, João Jesus Caetano. He is the president of the Transportation and Mobility Institute of Portugal, and it will be a starting point for us to talk about the topic we selected, and afterwards we'll go into a deeper discussion between the speakers, where I will actually be one of the ones at the table. So, João, please, you're welcome to the floor and give your keynote speech.
Good afternoon. Can you hear me good? Good. I would like to start by thanking the Zero Association and Francisco Ferreira for inviting me here to deliver a keynote at the electrification of road transport. The world faces today relevant challenges of climate change and energy insecurity. And it is in the context of these challenges that the transition to electric transport is a necessity for a better and more sustainable world. Transport accounts for nearly 1/4 of global CO2 emissions. Not only that, over the past 30 years in Europe, transport carbon emissions increased 30% despite the considerable improvements in vehicles' energy efficiency. However, those gains have not been sufficient to offset the increase in transport demand, which is strongly coupled to economical growth. 3/4 of these emissions came from the burning of fossil fuels in internal combustion engine road vehicles. Electrifying road transport can significantly reduce these emissions as long as it's coupled to renewable energy sources. This is particularly true in countries like Portugal, where the energy mix clearly favors those sources. How? Now, you may ask, why are we doing this just now? Why are we so focused in the electrification of road transport at this moment in time, since battery electric vehicles have been around for as long as internal combustion engine vehicles? 3 major circumstances are accelerating this transition, which haven't occurred in the past 100 years, even though a few tries have been made to increase the penetration of electric vehicles, the last of which, in fact, occurred during the 90s in California. There is, in fact, an interesting documentary about this failed initiative that I invite everyone to watch, and it's called Who Killed the Electric Car? So the 3 major circumstances that we are facing now that we haven't had in the past are: the first, technological advancements. Over the last decade, EV batteries have become cheaper, lighter, and more efficient. The cost of these batteries have dropped by nearly 80% since 2010, making EVs more affordable, and the energy density increased substantially to a point where light EV range autonomy is now easily 400 or 500 kilometers. The second circumstance is policies incentives. Countries worldwide are implementing policies to promote EV adoption, from subsidies to tax credit to bans on the sale of new gasoline and diesel vehicles. By 2035, in many regions, governments are trying hard to drive the markets. The third is the climate emergency and the increase of public awareness. Consumers are increasingly aware of the environmental and economic benefits of electric vehicles. Lower operational costs, reduced maintenance, and the joy of driving a quieter, smoother vehicle make EVs an attractive choice. But electrifying transport isn't without its challenges. Expanding the charging infrastructure is a top priority. With that in mind, the European Union adopted the AFIR regulation, which sets the framework for the deployment of alternative fuel infrastructures across the member states. Let me briefly mention the fact that some of the most relevant assumptions for the deployment of an EV charging infrastructure under the AFIR regulation is the business and technical interoperability of the network. This assumption is present in the Portuguese public charging infrastructure by design. In fact, the Portuguese model, designed and developed during the end of the first decade of 2000, is the most sophisticated in the world, and we should make sure that we don't waste what we have conquered so far. There is no other way to tackle the challenge of the deployment of a wide charging infrastructure apart from a strong partnership between the government and private companies. Once again, the Portuguese model is based on this cooperation requirement, and it has been very successfully so far. Maybe Luís Barroso, the president of MOBI, can tell us a bit more about this during the debate that follows. One important vector of change is the electrification of road road transport is public transportation. Electrifying buses, trains, and shared mobility options can bring sustainable transport to millions. Cities like Shenzhen in China have already transitioned their entire bus fleet to electric, proving that it's possible to do it in a large scale. In Portugal, cities like Braga are operating that transition successfully, as it was presented here this morning. The benefits of this transition extend beyond the environment. The electrification of transport can create millions of jobs, reduce dependency on imported oil, and bolster energy security. For example, renewable energy can power EVs domestically, insulating economies from volatile global oil prices. Once again, that was one of the founding assumptions for the design and development of the Portuguese model. Since the first years of 2000, Portugal was strongly investment in the deployment of renewable energy sources. In closing, the electrification of transport is more than just a shift in technology. It's a pathway to a cleaner, healthier, and more equitable world. Thank you.
Thank you very much, João. So now I would like to invite Margarida Marques. She's manager at the European Youth Energy Network, and she will be the one now to make the discussion larger with the guests that will participate in this event.
Thank you, Francisco, for that introduction, and thank you, João, for those very interesting with a lot of facts. And panel is the proof that it's necessary cooperation to achieve this transition, and that's why I would like to ask for the speakers to join me. I will start with Luís Barroso from Mobier, followed by Professor Francisco from Zero Association, and then Tim for ICCT. Thank you. So I would like to start. I divided this moderation in three dimensions, in three main dimensions. One is the politically and strategic, followed by technological and infrastructure areas, and then the social dimension that sometimes is forgotten and should be also addressed. I will start with you, Tim. Because we have you have several experience in the ICCT, analyzing the critical moments and the critical view, how can we approach this public transportation globally wise? What concrete policy mechanism or incentives do you see that are more critical to accelerate this transition in European Union? And if it is possible to do the same policies across Europe, given that we have several contexts and each country is a country, but it's possible to make it uniform?
Thank you. And before I get started, I just want to thank Zero as well as the Portuguese Pavilion for hosting this event. I think it's an excellent topic for the Transportation Thematic Day, and really happy here to provide some insights from the International Council on Clean Transportation, or ICCT. Before I get started, just for those who are not familiar with ICCT, we're an independent research organization that provides research, analysis, and guidance for policymakers to develop better policies to promote clean transportation. And I really wanted to emphasize that policy piece, because I think in order to achieve decarbonization of the transportation sector, we'll really need governments to step up with strong policies. We see a rapid transition to zero-emission vehicles, so either battery electric vehicles fueled by renewable electricity or fuel cell electric vehicles fueled by green hydrogen as really a critical component to a transition to a decarbonized transportation sector. And there's 5 key policy areas that governments can really embrace in order to help to accelerate that transition to these cleaner zero-emission vehicles. That includes setting commitments and targets, so really laying out what the goal is for achieving electrification of different fleet types. So coming in with phase-out targets for different segments of the transportation sector, and then also including interim targets to make sure that the progress is made towards those goals of phasing out internal combustion engine vehicles. Governments can then follow that up with binding regulations, so really creating policies that lock in that transition timeline, such as fuel economy standards, CO2 emission standards, or sales requirements for zero-emission vehicles. At the early stage of the transition, financial incentives are also critical. While there's still a bit of a price difference in electric technologies versus conventional diesel technologies, it's important to provide financial incentives to spur that market development. And the fourth piece, which I think we'll get into here today, is charging infrastructure. So it'd also be critical to build out charging infrastructure networks to match the accelerated uptake of zero-emission vehicles. And finally, creating demand. So that demand side also has to be there. And I think kind of the topic we're talking about here today, public transportation, is a really great way to kind of spur that initial demand in a segment that really makes sense to electrify now. So quickly, I just want to go through some of the key policies that are driving the transition to zero-emission buses in the European Union, starting at the European Union level. So the Clean Vehicles Directive has been setting requirements for publicly procured buses to be zero-emission or use low-carbon fuels. And those targets have been steadily ramping up and have been really important in driving early adoption of zero-emission buses and fleets across Europe. This year, the European Union also finalized their update to heavy-duty vehicle CO2 emission standards. And for the first time, urban or city buses were included in this regulation. And the regulation actually sets sales targets for new vehicle sales that need to be electric. So by 2030, 90% of the new buses sold in Europe have to be electric, and by 2035, 100%. So that really sets the timeline for the complete phase-out of new internal combustion engine bus sales. And then at the national government level, national governments are going further. So they're really bringing up that pace of transition by setting their own national targets. So I want to highlight here the Netherlands and Denmark as 2 countries that have brought forward those targets. So both countries have aimed to have 100% of new buses coming in their fleets be electric by 2025, and for their entire fleets to be electric by 2030. And finally, the regional national government policies are supplemented by city policies. And cities are really the ones implementing kind of these transitions and are the ones that are benefiting the most from the transition to zero-emission vehicles in terms of better air quality, better access to transportation, and other things that are coming from this transition. So we see cities setting zero-emission fleet targets, so again, kind of bringing forward those dates for having 100% zero-emission fleets, and committing to things like low or zero-emission zones that are driving the electrification of not only bus fleets, but other segments as well. And we're seeing that have an impact now. So as of last year, we're seeing sales for electric buses in Europe really on par with diesel buses. So we're really starting to see that take over as the dominant technology for new buses entering fleets. So with that, I'll thank you, and I'm there.
Thank you, and I think that data and that timeline, it's very urgent, and every country in Europe and globally wise also should be aware and taking that in consideration. So yes, that's very interesting. Further, Francisco, I would like also to ask you ask a question regarding these topics. In your opinion, what is the number one action that policymakers should take in consideration to accelerate and to accelerate this transition to electrification of the public transport?
One of the issues, actually, it was proposed by Zero, is that not only looking at public transport, and here we talk about buses and taxis, which are also considered public transport, but including also other types of fleets, for instance, for distribution of goods, or we call it in Portuguese the TVDE, basically Uber and Bolt. So all those fleets should be really the main target, where we wanted that all the newcomers by 2025 should be fully electric. That's one thing that we asked the Portuguese government to go forward, because I think that would make a considerable difference towards this transition, and we really would like to have this to happen, meaning that it's not only the vehicles by itself, but again, as it was already said, we need the infrastructure to be there. We've been visiting cities where, for instance, taxi stops, they have the chargers for the taxi drivers to actually get the necessary energy to travel during the day. So it should be a priority, and that is a combination of incentives at the national level. We have had some in Portugal, but not sufficient. And we need a key role by the companies and particularly by municipalities. One of the ideas that was also explained is this zero emission zones. So we're not talking, we're not continue to talk about the so-called low emission zones. What we really want is to have zero emission zones. And if we get these in the center, in the downtowns of large cities, everywhere in Europe, and there are countries that are already advancing, like in the UK or even Spain or France, we achieve, a full goal of lowering the carbon emissions, but also the air pollution and the noise. That's what we want to have. And of course, with the combination of lowering the number and the area of roads in these spaces to make them more attractive for people. So one of the two things that I also would like to touch upon is that in countries like in Portugal, where we have currently in this year more than 80% of renewable electricity, it is important to actually have contracts by the companies to purchase 100% renewable electricity. And therefore, your operational emissions actually go down to zero, which is clearly important. On the trains, it's basically the same. On the ferries is also important. So in Lisbon, we're starting with the ferries through the Tagus River. It has been a difficult and painful process, but it's the way forward. In the trains, we're also doing that conversion in many cases. But definitely, we need that transition to go as soon as possible, and with a clear aim, which is not only electrify the public transport, but make this public transport more attractive, and that is done also by emphasizing the need for measures to avoid the use of individual passenger vehicles, particularly in daily home, work, driving pathways.
Thank you very much for that intervention. And the infrastructure was already mentioned twice. That is very important to guarantee. We already see in the cities that we already have a lot of infrastructure for private owners, for private cars. And now I would like to ask Luís, that has a lot of experience in the infrastructure and also technological in this topic. How is Mobier driving to progress in accelerating this transition and promoting also electric public transportation? And because it's a different sector from private, so it's high utilization of the vehicles, they need to be always, the buses need to be always working, so the needs to be fast charge, needs to be quick stops. How do you feel that Mobier can address this situation? And it's the charging, it's the only way to improve, or for example, have local storage of energy can be also a way of making these chargers faster.
Uh, Thank you very much for the invitation to be here. It's for me a pleasure to talk and share my insights with you about this theme. In fact, and João in the beginning of this session was very kind with Mobi, but it's true. There is many people today that see the relevancy of Mobi in all the process to make Portugal mobility greener. And I think including Zero or inviting Mobi to this session is a way of recognize this role. Today, Portugal is leading the process in Eurozone countries in terms of the largest share of battery electric vehicle and plug-in electric vehicle registration. In last September, we reached an relevant milestone. For the first month, the number of electric vehicles sold in Portugal was higher than the gasoline ones. So these are results that make us very proud in the process and show us that we are in the good way to do the things. Of course, when we talk about public transport, our role is not so relevant, but I believe that our model could have, and its unique characteristics could have very good insights to make easier the process of public transport. And why didn't we yet have so relevant role in this process? Because most of the green transition, it was made in urban places where the specificities of the buses operation and the fact that they have their own depots makes that to them find their tailor-made solutions. It's not, and you believe what I'm talking about, because since a couple of years I was responsible of the operations of Carris, that is the bus company in Lisbon. In terms of taxis, because our TVDEs that Francisco talked about it, until now the solutions that we have, it's making they are responding to the demand that we have in terms of private places that the drivers could charge their cars, and also in the public infrastructure, because there is not so the number of cars is not so high, so we can today offer them solutions. And because Mobi model that with the same card you can charge your card in private and public places, it's very useful for the companies to give a card to the drivers to charge wherever they want it. So it's very easy, and because of that, it's not used to us to make more than to put, and it's not so and it's a very important role to make all the process in operation. Um, Other issue that I want to appoint it is when we're going to pass to interregional or long distance driving buses. On that, in this issue, we of course have ways to make the things different and to make it easier. Why? Because we are changing for heavy duty infrastructure that is also a goal of AFIR. And um, did, this come with a very new challenge in terms of power of the network in distribution energy, the grid, and also in the places. There is several standard European issues that we needed to see defined. For instance, what kind were going to be the sockets to charge in the public infrastructure, the buses or the heavy duty cargo cars, or which is going to be the maneuver space needed for them to charge, or even the amenities for the passengers or drivers where during the charging operation. No matter this, Mobi is working on the process, and in the next couple of weeks we're going to hold 2 workshops, a closed one for the bus and cargo companies, to discuss with them what are their issues, what are their challenges, for us to drive the best solution that meet their expectations. One final point about this. Germany has placed a public tender for heavy-duty infrastructure in their motorways, and they call it the solution "Bring Your Own Power Charge." They ask to talk with us, and at the final, what we see that Germany are doing now, it is to reply the Portuguese Mobi model for the heavy duty, but they told us that they going to spread it for all the country for private owners solutions. And in this case, Portugal, of course, no one knows better than us to implement these solutions in the field. So we are very best in terms of technical. We are very best qualified to do it.
That is really good that our achievements can achieve something even bigger, and sharing information also. And technological wise, it's very important at this moment to achieve the neutrality that we aim for. And because, Tim, you collect a lot of information and regarding this topic, cities have a high demand for public transportation, and it's, in my opinion, I can say as a student I used a lot of public transportation in university, and it was always full. So a high demand in metropolitan areas, they are always being used. How do you think we can tailor to fit electrification in public transportation targets using what you discover in your research in terms of innovations, technologically wise, or even models of infrastructure that could fit this demand of high demand?
Yeah, I think it's an excellent question. I think I'll start with this one word, optimization. So we have various different zero-emission technologies now available for public transit operators and authorities to choose from. So we have battery electric buses, we have fuel cell electric buses, and for battery electric buses, we have various different ways to charge those. So we can have models where the buses are out for service all day and then parked at a depot overnight and charged slowly. We have models where buses use fast charging on routes, so they're able to maybe travel more kilometers each day, but you're using perhaps more expensive electricity during the day and higher speed chargers. Or you could have creative solutions like battery swapping that we've seen in other international contexts where you're actually replacing the battery in order to keep that bus in service for longer periods each day. So I think when we're talking about transitions from traditional internal combustion engine buses to electric options, it's really about understanding how can we get as close as possible to a one-to-one replacement rate. So how can we replace one internal combustion engine bus with one electric bus? And that really depends on matching the right technology, the right charging strategy with the operations of a given route. So there at the ICCT, we've done a lot of work to really look at kind of what are the key characteristics that operators need to be understanding in order to make those decisions and have that optimization. So I think it comes down to really understanding the service profile of a given route, how different conditions like ambient temperature might impact the performance and energy efficiency of electric buses, energy demand when it comes to the route profile. If you have a very hilly route, that'll be very different than if you have a flat route. And then doing the analysis to look at kind of for different technologies, how can we get as close as possible to that one-to-one replacement ratio? And I think there's now a lot of international experience, a lot of experience in the EU that folks can build on. We saw in China, who were really a leader in the e-bus transition, so they were doing it before anyone and really wanted to get electric buses on their roads as quickly as possible. But to do that, they had to replace existing diesel buses with more and more electric buses. So it wasn't the most efficient approach, but it's on the road as soon as possible. So there's learnings there about how kind of other jurisdictions can learn from that, from other international experiences to really bring costs down and make sure kind of at the end of the day that that same level of service is being provided for that demand. So leave it there. Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you very much for sharing the information. Of course, as I said, socially dimension is also very important. We know that in urban areas we have a lot of transportations, buses, for example, and even chargers. But when we go to more isolated rural areas, that is not the case. Francisco, what are the main challenges to hinder an inclusive but also optimizing this transition, accelerating as because 2030 it's around the corner, and we need to guarantee that the bigger cities are served, also the ones that normally are already without this service, how we can guarantee that they continue with the service, we increase the demand of the buses, but still support this transition.
Okay, so one of the things that I believe is extremely important is financing, and we believe that the role that, for instance, in Portugal we have with the environmental fund has to be much broader in terms of the support. In many cases, we know that it's cost efficient to actually have an electric car instead of a combustion engine car. If you do the calculations, and of course there is always a footprint, a material and energy footprint associated with the electric vehicles. They're not full paradise, but they are much better than combustion vehicles. So one of the things is financing to the people, particularly also some financing to the fleets, to the conversion of the fleets. That in the buses, in the bus fleet, we have that support from the European Commission through the different funds, and we also have that support outside of the metropolitan areas, and also there are programs, for instance, for the taxis. There is the so-called transport fund, I think, that actually supports the conversion of both, has two components: the digitalization and the 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 purchase of electric taxis. But we really need to expand that with, of course, targets to be fulfilled. But again, when you talk about the social component, I say that this is really important, to support the fleets. For instance, there's a lot of drivers, taxi drivers, that with small companies, sometimes just with one taxi, and they need that support. Not only the money, but also um, um, the experience from others, the exchange, the support by public authorities to make that transition. And at the same time, we will have ETS2, the so-called European Trading System 2, where we'll get a lot of money to be directed through the so-called climate fund, the social climate fund. We will have an opportunity to again support the small companies, to support the small businesses to make those transitions. And even in Portugal, for instance, talking again about the electric bus, there was a division of the financing from the current recovery and resilience plan to finance not only the metropolitan areas but also outside the metropolitan areas. So I really think that we need to generate more funding, take into account the different social circumstances of the different companies. The same for the people that use electric vehicles, and then we need targets and regulation to achieve those targets. On the benefits by doing this, and I think Luís touched upon a very important issue, which is our electricity grid is in many cases not prepared for charging bus vehicles, vehicles that need to go from Lisbon to Porto or to other places. So we need a combination of that infrastructure with disincentives and also monitoring of what is happening, what are the difficulties, and how we can overcome them.
Thank you very much, and it's a really good connection to now ask Luís about because more with the business view, because doing this transition, adapting the chargers that we have, but for buses, for example, requires an investment. In your perspective, business-wise, how can we create a financing model partnership between private and public to guarantee that this transition happens and it's a quick transition, and also at the same time it needs to be spread all over the country, even in rural areas that maybe the return it's not that quicker as a city as Lisbon or Porto, for example, in Portugal.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to try to be fast because the yellow flag is up. And for to making the electric transition mobility happen, we needed three things, basically: will, money, and action. It's the basic things that we need. Of course, in terms of will, we have already implemented a good solution, and with that we add also the action. Portugal is not a country with lots of money, okay? But in terms of money, when we're talking about getting money, you usually use these three kind of resources: tax, incentives or exemptions, subsidies, or structure finance solutions. Okay, and I wanted, because I need to be shortly, I wanted to address this for RED 3. RED 3 that was revised in the last year, at the end of the year. In terms of electric mobility, talks about emission of e-credits for electric mobility. And this mechanism could be a very good one for all countries, including Portugal. And what is a mechanism, a credits mechanism? It is a solution that a company or a private owner of a charger could sell a credit for the green energy that he use in their consumption diary. So imagine what it can be for the public company that have buses electric or taxis to use a mechanism of this for financing their activity. It's going to be very important, and also incentives them to use green energy, because only if they have green energy they can sell, they can have e-credits to sell to the fuel fossil companies to reduce their environment issue. And Portugal, with MOBI model, once more, it's a very good position. Why? Because in our model we have full interoperability that AFIR demands. We have open data that AFIR demands, and we have other things that AFIR doesn't demand, but it's going to be a tendency in the next years. That is the segregation of electric consumptions from the electric sector. With that, we know very well and in the easy way, how much green energy that electric mobility is consuming. And with that, we can, in real terms, measure the real impact in the environment for the electric mobility transition. In the other countries that they already have these mechanisms, what they do, it is work in estimatives. So you don't know if the benefits are really the ones that we sought to. And this is a way that Portugal can, with this model, again show to the world the difference to an impact on all the system transition.
Thank you very much, and that is a very optimistic way of almost finish. I have one more question, a quick question. For one word, what is the milestone to guarantee an immediate action for this transition? If you had to describe it in one word, or a date, or a milestone, which was it to guarantee that we can achieve this transformation and acceleration?
Yeah, just very quickly, I would say cities committing to zero-emission fleets before 2030.
I would say the need for simplification of the system and grid infrastructure reliance.
Let the people that knows about the business work.
That is true. That is a really good statement. I think we have to finish, unfortunately. I would like to thank you for your present, and it's really interesting to have three completely different perspectives for the same subject, but essential to guarantee that we move forward. And so we leave here with a very optimistic. It's possible. We can include all the country, more developed or not, more isolated cities. We have the data that shows that we have all the technological part to guarantee that we can move forward and transform our buses, for example, in more greener. And also we have the business case that is possible to guarantee that this can move forward. So thank you very much for your presence.